Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be reading an article and providing commentary on Behind the Curtain Inside Biden's Slow Walking Strategy on Israel and Gaza. And so this Behind the Curtain series on Axios has been very informative. I believe we've done 2 videos on this so far. And so this gives us a sneak peek into the inner workings of the American government and really the Western world in general, because this is where all the decisions are made and these people have access to those decision makers. So let's continue to look behind the curtain here. So President Biden, despite his full-throated support for Israel and its right to strike Hamas, has methodically and meticulously delayed the looming invasion of Gaza, U.S. officials tell us. Okay, a number of reasons behind that. One is, unfortunately, they're full-throated supporting a country that is bombing hospitals, bombing churches, bombing mosques, not allowing fuel in to allow incubators to continue running. I believe I read very recently that 39 babies on incubators died. Just horrific accident. Parents are literally just taking the parts of their children out in baggies because they're just blown to pieces out of hospitals. It's just horrific. People are trying to flee the hospitals that are getting bombed, and they're waving white flags and they're being shot as they try to flee the hospital. Just heinous war crimes. Israel is clearly a psychopathic nation. The vast majority of people support this type of act. It's been shown in various surveys. And so this is just the most egregious thing that has happened within my lifetime, as far as I can tell. I can't think of anything that remotely comes close to this. So far, we were actually expecting by the end of November to have 1% of the Gaza population be wiped out. So pretty horrific numbers. And this is November 13th at the time of making this video. And it's already well past the point that 1% of the Gazan population has been massacred. So we are far ahead of schedule for Israel's genocide of Gaza, and it's been horrific, been shocking. It is a world-changing thing that's going on right now. I don't think people fully realize the ramifications of this. The Islamic world is in complete shock right now, and they're trying to figure out how to respond, retaliate, while a lot of their leaders are puppets of the West. And so you're going to see a lot of mix-ups right now, particularly because the Russians and Chinese are going to back any anti-Western candidates, which there's going to be a lot of anti-Western sentiment that's going to percolate up to the highest echelons of government within the Islamic world. There were 4 countries, I believe it was, that recently voted against allowing essentially like a sanctions package on Israel. They were going to stop flights for Israelis over their country's airspace. They were going to stop things like oil to Israel, things like that. And I believe it was, trying to remember this off the top of my head, I believe the 4 countries that rejected that agreement were Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Morocco, and United Arab Emirates were the 4 countries. And so those are the 4 most captured countries that are willing to do what America and what Israel says. So we will see what happens there. And actually, the recent ongoings in Saudi Arabia kind of makes me think that maybe in exchange for pivoting towards BRICS and for allowing other currencies aside from the dollar to be used for oil trade, maybe Saudi Arabia had to give some things up to America in exchange for like not having things like its assets frozen and revolts against the government in Saudi Arabia. Maybe they had to commit completely to normalization with Israel and to support for Israel in the region. That's my best guess, because right now you either have a deal was made that is the reason Saudi Arabia is so deep-throatedly supporting Israel, or MBS is trying to play both sides and it's just not working particularly well. Because this is like, if you're playing both sides, this is a very dangerous time to be supporting the West. Like if you wanted to just like fence it, this is not the time to show your support for the West, because it's really going against the entire Islamic world. So I personally think there was a deal made, and for some reason at this point Saudi Arabia wants to commit to their side of the deal, which is support for Israel in the region, normalization of ties. And so they can't go back on that. They want to maintain trustworthiness with others. Very unfortunate. I don't think really anyone expected things to heat up in the Middle East to this extent. And so I think when they made the deal so that they could pivot towards BRICS and pivot towards non-US dollar being used for trade of oil, I don't think they expected this to happen in the Middle East, because I really don't think since like the first Nakba, I don't think there's been anything that really came close to this. There's been some wars between the Arabic world, the Muslim world, and the Israelis, but this feels really different from everything I've read about those accounts. One is just the amount of evidence we have, the amount of media and entertainment attention to this. Like, this is just really took over social media right now. Another fact is just the Muslim world is just far more powerful than it was during prior conflicts in terms of its tech savviness, in terms of its educational level, things like that. So I think things are different this time. So why is Saudi Arabia deep-throatedly supporting Israel? I think it has to have come down to some type of deal. Okay, let's see what's next. Driving the news, Biden dangled high-level visits, including his own military support and public backing to buy time in Gaza. He also made plain that America doesn't want Israel to act impulsively or without considering U.S. concerns. Okay, so this idea of an invasion of Gaza, I mean, it's already happened at the time of making this video, so this article is a little bit old. But it's... How do I explain this? I don't think it's going particularly well, and I do think that we've seen a number of incidences that has really furthered my belief that tanks are just not particularly good at really, I almost want to say anything at this point in modern warfare. So let's look at it. In urban warfare, a tank can easily get taken down by rocket fire, anti-tank missiles, because people could hide in any of the buildings. And if you're trying to act humane, you're not going to just level the place. Israel's leveling the place, and because they're realizing that their equipment is not functioning in an urban environment. So they're just leveling everything in northern Gaza. But so in urban warfare, tanks are not particularly helpful. And in terms of just open terrain, tanks are also not helpful, because then it can be taken out by aircraft such as drones. And so really, we're just seeing across the board, and I think Russia realized this in their conflict as well, tanks are just not particularly helpful. If you have control of an area, then tanks may act as a zone of control, an enforcement mechanism, particularly for things like small arm fires. But there's been such a proliferation of weaponry that can take out tanks and even the most advanced armor of tanks that I just don't see tanks being particularly effective. And there's a lot of evidence that Israel has lost a significant chunk of their tanks trying to invade Gaza like this. I do wish, speaking still about the invasion, I do wish Hezbollah did not say that they would invade the north if Israel got bogged down in Gaza, because we're seeing that that was a red line that was crossed, and Hezbollah really hasn't committed to what they said they were going to commit to. So just things to consider, things to think about here. Anyways, I've spent too long on this talking about the invasion. So why does the invasion matter? Why does what Biden's doing matter? Okay, so the slow walking strategy flows from 5 strategic worries U.S. officials tell us, and Axios Middle East expert Barak Ravid says. Biden wants more humanitarian aid to as many Palestinians as possible to limit a humanitarian crisis and massive global backlash. Okay, so this is weeks later from the time of this article's creation, and Biden has completely failed here. Like, this is, he's going to be known as Genocide Biden for the rest of his life. He wants the estimated 500 plus U.S. citizens trapped in Gaza to get out before the fighting intensifies. Half a dozen attempts to get them out since the Hamas attack have failed, partly because Hamas prevented Americans from leaving, officials say. Not really true. Hamas is trying to trade the hostages for things like fuel to keep the hospitals running. And I think that sounded like a win-win situation to me, because babies wouldn't be dying in hospitals, but Israel did not want to do those types of trades. Let's see what the third one is. He needs more time to fortify America's military presence in the Middle East, given rising fears that Iran or Iran-backed terrorist groups will attack Israel. We've not seen that materialize yet. And to be quite frank, it does seem like the Americans are the ones that want to escalate things. The neocons, the neoconservatives in particular, really does seem to want to have war with Iran. So we're going to see what happens with that. But so far, it seems like the Americans are the ones escalating there. Okay, so Joe Biden fears a quick, impulsive assault on Gaza will land Israel in a long, bloody street battle that could kill tens of thousands of people and still not destroy Hamas. It could also push Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies to join the war, with deployed Americans likely in harm's way. Okay, so we are seeing a separate theater of war there, which is American bases in places like Syria and Iraq are getting attacked on a pretty regular basis. There is a ton of eyewitness testimony, but we haven't had verification that Americans are on the ground in Israel helping with the invasion. And supposedly, the military personnel in Israel from America are to help release the hostages, but you could stretch those orders pretty far, saying that, well, yes, they could help with the ground invasion in order to get a release of the hostages. So who knows what's going on that front, but America is getting attacked in the Middle East right now to an extent that hasn't been seen in years. Biden wants to buy time for Benjamin Netanyahu, who has his own reasons to delay. Netanyahu, despite political pressures to move fast against Hamas, has always been risk averse. He has a somewhat skeptical view of the Israeli military plans and wants time, so he's entertaining other opinions. He's also willing to give more time for hostage release talks while the IDF better prepares for a ground assault. Okay, so yeah, not much to say on this. One thing I will say is people tend to think of Benjamin Netanyahu as this very warmonger-like figure, but if you look at the actual people within the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, things like that, if you look at other high-ranking politicians, Benjamin Netanyahu is actually a bit of a moderate compared to some of the vitriolic, psychopathic, genocidal rhetoric coming out of other members of primarily his coalition, which is obviously very popular because he's in charge and his coalition is in charge. Okay, so now onto the big picture. Israeli military leaders are growing impatient with the delay. IDF Chief of Staff General Herzi Halevi said Tuesday the IDF is ready for the ground operation and only awaits an order from the government. Top military leaders want to strike by land on top of constant aerial bombings to avenge the Hamas terror attack that killed 1,400 Israelis and left 200 held hostages. Okay, so we're learning a few things from this in terms of the Israeli casualties. It looks like at least 3/4 of the casualties were of military personnel, and these are based off of the actual names being released from Israel. You could see the huge list that they came up with, and they all have like lieutenant, colonel, general, etc., in front of their names. And so they were very clearly military personnel. You also have to remember that Israeli citizens, adult citizens, get military training. So it's any guess about how many of the people without name or without military ranking, how many of them were armed and equipped for fighting Hamas at the time. So how many of them were actually enemy combatants? And then on top of that, we have aerial footage showing that the Israelis, during the fog of war, during the chaos, didn't know what to do. And so they just shot at everyone from the air. And given the amount of vehicles destroyed and the severity of the destruction, it looks like they actually took out a lot of their own civilians. And so the hilarious thing is, hilarious in the saddest way possible because it's led to this genocide, but it looks like Hamas actually conducted the attack in the most humane way possible, and there were very minimal civilian casualties. It looks like they actually had, as far as we could tell, no civilian casualties that occurred outside of crossfire between the Israelis and Hamas during the time of the attack. And so actually, as far as we could tell, given all available evidence, the direct casualties from Hamas are all military personnel. And Israel, on the other hand, 99% are civilians when they're attacking Gaza. So one of those is a genocidal maniac and is not the supposed terrorist organization that is considered a terrorist organization in the West. So should be concerning to Americans who think of Israel as the humane actor and Hamas as the inhumane actor, because that's not what the casualty statistics say. And these are the casualty statistics given by Israel. Okay, so moving on. But America's calculation is more complicated. Biden wants to free the remaining hostages and win the release of more captive Israelis. U.S. officials feel progress is being made. Okay, whatever. It's not being made. All right, so let's end here. So between the lines, Biden shares Bibi's concerns about Israel's plan. Biden wants an Israeli invasion to be more Mosul 2016 and less Fallujah 2004. That's why he sent three-star Marine Lieutenant General James Glynn, a veteran of Mosul, to advise Israelis on their military planning, U.S. officials say. Axios has learned that Secretary of State Tony Blinken told a group of Jewish American leaders on Monday, we're not limiting Israel or telling it what to do. We're asking hard questions, giving our best advice based on our own experience. So, United States, people like to say, and I hear, unfortunately, I'm a big fan of Brian Berletic, but I also hear him saying quite frequently that it is America in control and Israel listens to America. If you're watching this conflict, I don't know how you could believe that, because it seems like America is doing whatever Israel wants, and America has no sway over Israel whatsoever. Like, America gives billions of dollars to Israel and says, hey, could you just like not murder as many babies? And Israel's like, no, we're going to murder as many babies as we want. And United States is just like, oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. You could do that. Okay. And the argument I hear against it, and unfortunately, again, Brian has made this argument frequently, is that, well, America needs Middle Eastern oil, but I don't think this is helping to get Middle Eastern oil right now, turning the entire Islamic world against the United States, as has been going on ever since the United States has been the attack dog of Israel in the Middle East. So it certainly looks like Israel's in charge here. United States seems to have no influence over stopping the rabid genocidal maniacs in Israel. So that's what I'll leave you with, this Axios article. If you found this to be helpful, informative, please leave us a thumbs up, a like. It helps us in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble. And please leave a comment in the comment box below, questions, concerns, critiques you might have. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.